Sonny Shipp, 24/7 Sports, good enough to give us a little bit of time here on this Wednesday, and it's a big one in his line of work as Lamar Brown set to make his announcement tomorrow early afternoon from here in Baton Rouge. Let's talk about it with Sonny. How we doing, sir?
Good, brother. How about you?
I'm good. It seems that a lot of folks are looking into this recruitment, but nobody seems to have a definitive lean. Is that where you stand?
Well, I think the biggest thing is that, and I kind of go back to where, pre-NIL era, you when you would tell folks, 2 days before an announcement, like, look, this kid's going back and forth, and a lot of people would be like, there's no way this kid's going back and forth, there's no way. Well, and now I think they realize, because back then we knew that there was always shady stuff going on under the table in recruiting, and now you finally get to see that, yes, these kids are going back and forth, and a lot of that is because, offers change, opportunities change, and that's where we are at now, in this NIL era, and I think it's one of those cases with Lamar Brown to where you see A&M feel good, then you see LSU feel good, and there's a reason that that kind of waffling, I think, goes back and forth, and I think that's because Brown is giving those indications, that the pendulum has swung their way. And so I really look at this right now as both staffs are, like everyone is still working him, not just A&M, not just LSU. Miami's still chirping in his ear. Some other coaches are still trying to, see if there's an opening for them to get involved. And I really think that you're probably going to be seeing this mentioned in this manner all the way leading up to his announcement tomorrow.
So as far as the pitches go, both are looking for him to play defensive line. Am I correct? You're obviously in the same conference. You've got two coaching staffs that have now been there for a couple of years. Is there a significant difference there if we're talking outside of money, other than one's at home and one's kind of spreading your wings and flying the coop?
And just looking at this through, looking at it, I guess, through our untrained college football experienced eyes, you look at Mike Elko, and, he's a very, very known, well-known D-line developer over at A&M as their head coach. I think that is a really big selling point for them. But then you look over at, LSU, and you're right there close to home. And so, that I think is the biggest factor working in their favor. And look, when you're talking the number one defensive lineman in the country, we know the premium that the NFL places on defensive tackles, kind of like offensive tackles, and so translate that to the NIL game, and you're going to have that same value placed on these guys, especially when you're talking about a five-star, like Lamar Brown. And so, if you're looking at it from the LSU perspective, and from what I hear is that it's not a situation to where, Texas A&M is offering him this much in NIL opportunities, and LSU has to match that number, that there's a lot of things going on for the home team that would allow them to not have to match that number. And so when you're LSU, I think that's what you're trying to maneuver right now, is trying to see, okay, how else can we illustrate, how else can we highlight the benefits of coming here, when it's not all about money. You told us in the very beginning, Coach, it's not all about money. It's, my process is not going to be all about money. So how can we point out, the benefits of staying home and going to LSU without making it all about money? And so when you talk about these, these discussions that they're having right now, these conversations they're having with Brown, I think that's a lot of it when you talk in terms of posturing, and it's not necessarily, okay, Texas A&M is offering you this much, here's $1 more, or anything like that.
So question that's impossible to answer, but I'll toss it to you just to get your thoughts. Whoever he commits to tomorrow, does the other school get some sort of unofficial visit for a football game this fall, in your opinion?
I mean, okay, let's say this kid commits to Texas A&M,
Mm-hmm.
and now he's in Baton Rouge, he's on LSU's campus and stuff. And I'm trying to think, I'm trying to go back and remember. We've had some U-High kids that have, that have spurned LSU in the past, but I don't really believe any of them have done it this early in the process. Can you correct me on that? Does anyone jump out at you?
Tim Williams, then Jordan Gilbert, those guys went elsewhere.
Yeah, but do you remember it being a case to where they committed in July and they still had 6 months?
I don't think so. No.
See, that's what I'm trying to recall, and I can't really recall a situation like
I mean,
that.
obviously Dylan Moses.
Obviously Dylan Moses. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Obviously Dylan Moses, but then he went to IMG. And so I don't think we've ever seen that situation where you've got a U-High kid who goes to school on LSU's campus, and you've got all these all these games and stuff going on and stuff, and I don't think there's any question. Now, as far as flip it over to if he commits to LSU, does he make an unofficial visit to Texas A&M? I would think absolutely so. I would think absolutely so. And if he commits to A&M, I think he visits LSU. And the reason being is that this has been an LSU Texas A&M kind of going back and forth thing for quite a while now. These two schools have been duking it out for him for a long time now, and so if he commits to one of them and you've still got 5 months to go in the process, I think the relationships that he has with both schools and with the coaching staffs on both ends are going to make it tough for him to not make at least one more unofficial visit. Now, of course, in some of these NIL deals, there's some, there could be some stipulations or whatever as far as that stuff goes, but I don't think his recruitment is even close to being over, regardless of who he commits to tomorrow.
I know y'all have got crystal balls over there at 24/7. What's your gut tell you as we sit here about 23 hours out?
And right before I came on with you, I was like, okay, I've got to tell my subscribers where I'm sitting on this right now, because I knew we were going to talk about it. And, yesterday around this time, I talked to enough people. I said, man, I really think it's close. I said, but if you put a gun to my head and you made me pick, I'd feel a little safer picking A&M yesterday. Now, if you did the same thing, I'd feel a little safer picking LSU. And that's why, and you hate to say that, but it's finally you can finally explain why you waffle back and forth and why kids waffle back and forth late in the game like this. It's because, hey, you're getting better offers, you're getting more opportunities, you're getting more money and stuff. If you'd have said that 4 years ago, man, Shannon Terry would have been wanting to fire me.
I get it, and it's one of those deals where I feel like this is me being very, very green to the game, but I feel like the fact that the insiders don't have a real handle on it tells me that neither staff probably has a real handle on it, which also, if I'm just going to deduce that down, means he probably hasn't made promises to either staff that he is not going to follow through on. He's just kind of taking his time, which to me is pretty admirable, but I'm just reading it from a long way away.
No, and I think that's pretty, and I think that's pretty accurate. I don't think. From everyone that I've talked to, inside, outside the building, I have not heard one person who's told me that, look, Lamar Brown has told LSU, it's going to be them. And flipping it over, talking to people who have some of those same connections on the A&M side, they don't, they may feel good, but they don't feel like he's in the bag or anything like that, And so I really think that, I think if you're looking at it, I think A&M is probably more worried than LSU is right now, just because they know how hard it is to get a Louisiana kid out that LSU wants. But they've done it in the past. Look, Speedy Noel comes back to mind in 2014. He was a guy LSU really wanted. He went to A&M. But if you're LSU, I think you go into it a little more optimistic than pessimistic, just because at the end of the day, while Texas A&M may have more money on the table, do they check as many boxes as LSU checks with everything outside of that? Your family, all of those variables.
Yeah, we'll be following along tomorrow. All your recruiting coverage, your team coverage, you can find it over there. Go 24/7. Sonny and the team over there with Glenn doing an awesome job. Sonny, we appreciate some time, and we'll be tuned in tomorrow.
Absolutely, brother. You have a good one, man.
You too. That is Sonny Shipp. And I honestly, truly mean that. Obviously, y'all know I want Lamar Brown to pick LSU because he's a very highly recruited player. Looks like he's going to be a great one, and I'd like him to stay home and play for LSU because that's a team that I like. And I don't like A&M at all, and I wouldn't like it if he played for A&M and did great things there. That's just because that's what my rooting interest lies in. But really, to me, as a person, if I try to strip down those layers that are purple and gold and go, okay, just look at this objectively, the only thing you can really do to me that is, and I use air quotes here, wrong, would be to promise one thing and then pull the rug out at the end. If you do that, that's not, in my estimation, the best way to handle yourself. Now, these are 16, 17, 18-year-olds, 16, 17, 18-year-olds, especially when there's a lot of money involved, can do things that I don't think are the most ethical things in the world, and that's just part of being a kid. But it is what it is. If you just go through the recruiting process and pick one school over the other one, and it happens to be Texas A&M instead of LSU, that's not wrong. I wish it would have gone a different way. And it sounds like, just speaking to this specifically, when a high school recruit tells college coaches what he's going to do, that information gets out. It does. I know enough people in this business, they can get to the bottom of it. And nobody has gotten to the bottom of this one yet. Nobody. So to me, that suggests Lamar Brown has not promised anything to either side. And that's admirable in my estimation. You go through the process, you go on your visits. He's been to A&M a billion times. He's been to LSU every day, literally, of his high school career. And you just make that decision. Most of you that are listening to this radio station want it to go one way, but if he commits to Texas A&M and goes there elsewhere, that's a huge bummer for LSU fans, but it seems like it's been handled the right way. It seems like he's done things properly, and that's an admirable thing for somebody in his position. So appreciate Sonny for jumping aboard and helping us out with some recruiting. Hey, thanks for watching Hunt on LSU. Before you get out of here, do us a couple of favors. Hit that like button, leave your comments below, and subscribe to the channel for all your Fighting Tiger football talk. See you next time.